Hi, how are you guys? I'm Harrison. So I'm going to start the stream. Can you guys hear me good? Just wanted to make sure my mic and camera works. Perfect. Thank you for responding, Marcus and Zachary. and and now everybody's responding. That's wonderful. Okay, it's great to see that you're participating in the comments. So we have 22 people logged on right now. That's a good number, and we have like 10 more registered. So right now, if you haven't already, there's a little button at the bottom of this stream, and it's a vocab sheet for the Unit 5, which is the agriculture unit. This is the last stream in the unit. So if you want to go take a quick look at that in another tab, see what vocab words you don't know, you can put them in the ask a question section or put them in the chat over here. I'll try to make sure I mention them in the stream and incorporate them into the stream today. All right, so without further ado, I'll get started. All right, so today's stream is about agriculture history and revolutions, but as always, follow Think Fiveable on all social media platforms. You'll get notifications about streams and, pretty awesome. So here's the stream calendar for the rest of the week. I am actually teaching the APES stream on fishing practices tomorrow at 7 p.m. Eastern time. So if you're in APES and you like my stream, I would recommend watching that. All right. Now, today is exactly 70 days from May 5th, which is your AP exam. Woo! So it's a really good time to start reviewing your prep book or anything that you have, watching old Fiveable replays since everything on Fiveable is now free. Yay! But it's a really good time to start looking at things from Unit 1, maybe Unit 2, because some of you are wrapping up Unit 5 right now, anything like that, getting close to Unit 6. Maybe you're going out of order. I don't know, but it's a great time to start prepping right now. So today in the stream, we're going to go over the origins of agriculture in the first agricultural revolution, the second agricultural revolution, the Green Revolution, and then I'm going to talk about the modern global system of agriculture. All right, so I'll get started. Please make sure you look at the vocab sheet, make sure you can see it. I want you to make sure you know all the words. Vocab is one of the most important things in human geography to know, to use it in your FRQs. The test has a lot of vocab on it. It's really important. All right, so the origins of agriculture. So what is agriculture? Agriculture is basically just a fancy word for farming. It's growing things or taking care of animals that either you can eat them or you can go to the market and sell them. And basically, agriculture started when people wanted to grow food. They didn't want to just go around in hunter-gatherer groups anymore, which is what they did in the Paleolithic era. But the Neolithic era is when the first agricultural revolution started, which started what we now know as agriculture. So to answer the next main question, how did agriculture start? How did agriculture start? People moved around nomadically in these hunter-gatherer groups, but they didn't want to keep moving around nomadically. They wanted to stay in one place. They wanted to run a farm. Well, but they wanted to now what we know of as run a farm and have a family. They didn't want to have to forage for all their food. They didn't want to have to work so hard to kill all the animals that they wanted to eat. They wanted to live an easier life. That's basically how we started agriculture. And so here's a map of where all of the agriculture in the world started. These are all the native crops. A few of these are pretty important to know. You should know that wheat, barley, goats, those all come from the Middle East right here, what we call in the agriculture unit of human geography as the Fertile Crescent. Right here, this little crescent that I'm going over with my red pointer dot. You should also know that dogs, cattle, those come from Europe mainly, mostly Eastern Europe and the mountain areas. And then North America, the Latin America region, beans, gourds, maize, squash, those are all important to know. Also, llamas came from South America, and cotton. Cotton did not come over with the Europeans, it came from South America up during the age of slavery. So make sure you know those for your AP exam. I remember on my AP exam, I was actually had a few questions on like where the origins of things were, and like you had a map and you had to figure out which piece of the triangle, like from South America to Africa to Europe, like where these different things came from. So this map is a really good thing to look at to see, oh, well, chicken came from China, but goats came from the Middle East and Europe. Oh, and cotton came from South America. Just like you don't have to memorize this whole map, but just a good thing to look at and make sure you know. Now, the first agricultural revolution. This is what I said, what we started agriculture. Revolutions are kind of important. In human geography, they're a big theme for the course. So, it was the first domestication of plants and animals. And what that means is we figured out what seeds were. We put them in the ground. We grew plants. They eat them as food. It's not that much harder than that. And animals, they took the animals, they put them in a small enclosed space, and they breeded. They made more animals. They killed the animals for food. I'm not sure if they were able to get milk in that time period or not, but they were able to do things with the animals. And like I said, it started in the Fertile Crescent, the Middle East. So the Fertile Crescent is right here. We see that cat, like it's this little crescent right here. You can see the shape that I'm trying to make with the pointer right here, but not doing very well at. The Fertile Crescent. Why was it called the Fertile Crescent? Well, it was where they had a lot of fertile soil, and they could grow things there. They figured out, if we put water in this ground and we put some seeds here with the sunlight, it'll grow us food. Woohoo! So it's really interesting how what used to be the Fertile Crescent, where they grew all of the food, now most people think of the Middle East as a desert. And in the agriculture unit, or maybe even in urban geography, you'll learn about how desertification works. And if you want me to, I can go more in depth on desertification later, but basically they overuse the soil in the Fertile Crescent, and then they didn't plant crops right. They didn't use sustainable methods that we know of today for agriculture, and the soil just kind of went away, and we were left with sandy desert. And as I already said, they planted the seeds for the domesticated plants, and they were able to make crops from that. And then one of the major effects of the first agricultural revolution, if you're ever asked about ag revolutions on an FRQ on your test, if you're asking about something, it started cities. It started permanent settlements. Like I said earlier, everybody was in nomadic hunter-gatherer groups. Now, people actually started to live in one place for the rest of their life because they could run this agriculture, this farm, in this one place. They could keep their family there. It led to the population increase of what we call the Neolithic era, the Neolithic age. And this led to governments being formed, the rise of industry like agriculture. People were able to take the cotton from agriculture, make things with it. They were able to have social stratification, which is when people who are basically, in a rudimentary sense, it's when people who are poor are at the bottom of the social hierarchy, and people who are rich and make money and have a ton of crops are at the top. And they measured like what class they were in and what social stratification they were in by how many crops you could produce, how much you could get for them at the market, how many possessions you had, because we didn't use money back then. You had to trade for everything. All right, and now onto the second agricultural revolution. So we're going to big jump in time right here. The first agricultural revolution was between 10,000 BCE and 2000 BCE, and now we're all the way in the 1800s, the second agricultural revolution. What really started it was the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution is a big player in human geography. It's in this unit. It's in the unit about economics and development. It's because of the new technologies that were made in the Industrial Revolution, the cotton gin, the spinning jenny, factories even. They got away from the cottage industry. These new technologies like the plow, they helped speed up agriculture. They made agriculture, you needed less land for agriculture, and you needed less work on it. And these time-saving devices and new methods, it wasn't just technology, it was also new ideas that were forming, like intercropping, crop rotation. These are intercropping, I'll explain them. Intercropping goes when you plant different crops, like next to each other, like I'll plant a row of corn here, but then I'll put some trees in the middle, then I'll plant another row of corn, and then, maybe I'll put some soybeans right here to even out the soil nutrients. And then crop rotation is where every year you plant a different crop in the same field to help keep the soil in place, because what happened in the Fertile Crescent, the Middle East, why it turned to a desert, was that they kept overusing the soil with the same crops that they knew how to grow, and then the soil didn't have any nutrients. It wasn't sustainable to grow crops anymore, so it just flew away. This helped increase the productivity of agriculture. People were able to make more with less. And by that I mean they were able to make more crops, feed more people with less land, less seeds, and less work, less time, less energy. And also from the Industrial Revolution, one of the arguably biggest innovations was the railroad, the steam engine. It allowed for the transportation of food. People could stop being subsistence farmers, which means that you're only growing food enough for yourself, your family. You're not going to go sell it at the market. The subsistence agriculture really declined here because railroads allowed food to be shipped to faraway places. During this time, the Western U.S. was just being discovered. We were having manifest destiny here. And what happened is the railroad allowed for people to move farther west, get more plots of land. They could grow the land there in now Iowa, they could grow corn there and ship it to New York on this railroad. And then they were able to have a ton of growth in the big cities on the East Coast. They were also able to allow people to move westward and keep getting food. And this caused the big population growth that happened with the Industrial Revolution, as well as urbanization and going into the cities. And I'm going really fast now, guys. Please stop me. Please say something in the comments. If you don't understand something, please let me know if you don't understand a single word that I'm saying, and I will take the time to explain it. This is the last stream of the unit, and I want to make sure you know everything before you have your unit test tomorrow or just before the AP exam. All right. Getting it, it's fine. Let's go in the chat. That's always a good sign. But I see there are 25 other people on the stream, so don't be scared to speak up. Don't be scared to say, oh, what does desertification mean? Or, wait, when did the second agricultural revolution take place? There are no dumb questions here. I promise. All right. The Green Revolution. Now we're just going to go a little bit farther forward in time. So the Green Revolution happened with Norman Borlaug. He wanted to create more crops with less input. With the population growth, this happened in the late 1900s. So in the mid to late 1900s, there was big population growth. People were coming back from the wars. We needed more crops to feed the families that were coming in, but people were populating more areas. There was more development in this time period, and we don't have as many people who want to be farmers anymore. So we need more crops. We need to grow more crops with less land, less farmers, and less availability of these crops. So Norman Borlaug went down to Mexico and said, I got an idea. We can use this rice that we get from Asia and these wheat crops, and we can breed them together in a lab and make them special organisms to where we can grow more food for people. And he wants to make sure that we can grow more food with putting in less money, as well as the less land that we have, the less amount of farmers, and the less amount of time that we have to work. So he asked, how can we grow more products in the same land? And that's how we got genetically modified organisms. And another great thing that happened with the Green Revolution is we were able to start fighting world hunger. We were able to increase agricultural productivity, which means that we can now have less land, but still make more food. And an underlying aim of this revolution was for agribusiness to make more money. So in the 1900s, you see, big conglomerates are coming, big companies are starting up. You see, the stock market, when that got really popular in the 1920s, that was because we had a lot more companies. We had a lot more people who wanted to try to make money. Entrepreneurs were starting to be able to have their voices heard. They were making new things. In the Industrial Revolution, we had these people who came up with these new innovations and technologies. But in the 1900s is when we really started to become a nation of new ideas and forward thinking. So there were people, agribusiness. It's the business of agriculture that's just smushed into one word. All it means is that big companies, you can think of Monsanto, they make lots of money by growing crops that they sell. They sell the same crops the whole time. They just plant them in different fields, and they make a lot of money. Now, if you guys are freshmen, well, you're probably in high school if you're taking an AP course, but you're starting to think of what you want to do in college. I'm from Texas, by the way. So a big thing here that's less known is agribusiness. You can make a lot of money and go to college and not do, okay, this is a little tangent, but you can do a lot of things with agribusiness. You can just be a regular business person just talking about agriculture. Like, it's actually a really cool job opportunity if you're interested in doing business, but you don't want something that's really hardcore. Like, agribusiness is a really good option. It's a growing field because we have more and more development today in our society, and we need people to be fighting for, oh, we need this land for farming because we're not going to be able to feed our exponentially growing population. There is a such, Marcus asked a question in the chat, is there a such thing as agricultural engineering? Yes, that's like what we do with GMOs. We can breed crops together and make new strains of crops that are disease resistant, they're weather resistant, and also agricultural engineers can make, oh, well, we can combine these two types of soil to make crops better. Okay, so Norman Borlaug was more of just a scientific chemist, but he was, I guess, one of the foremost agricultural engineers, and you can look that up if you want more information on him specifically. But why he's important in this course is because he's the father of the Green Revolution. All right, and this is the Agricultural Revolution's graphic organizer that I made. And so I've run through this, but I would definitely recommend taking a picture of this. It's an easy thing to study. So I think I've gone over most of what's in this table, but I also included the Industrial Revolution in here, even though it's not specifically mentioned, because the Industrial Revolution is what caused the second agricultural revolution. We were able to have factories, we were able to have cities from the Industrial Revolution, and that's what really caused the second agricultural revolution to make agriculture more efficient. And so right now would be a great time to stop, take a picture of this, ask questions if you need to, you know? I'll give you a few seconds. All right, and I think I'm going to move on. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about the global system of agriculture. So when I was talking about agribusiness, this is what we do today. We trade crops, we do agriculture in a big global scale. So when I was talking about subsistence farming earlier, the opposite of subsistence farming is commercial agriculture. So agribusiness is commercial agriculture. And these large-scale commercial farms are replacing the small family farms, and now we're getting more agribusiness. And so Abriel asked a question, I'm so sorry if I pronounced your name wrong, in the chat. He says, do you think that there will be a third agricultural revolution? Well, okay. Just a little technical thing here. Sometimes on the AP exam, they refer to the Green Revolution as the third agricultural revolution. I get what you're asking. I'm sorry. I just wanted to mention that. It's weird. Sometimes they do. But, like, all you need to know is third agricultural Green Revolution, whatever you want to call it. It's about GMOs. But I get what you're asking. Will there be a further agricultural revolution? So, I mean, maybe, because if we're making more cities, like you see how much our population is growing, like, we're expected to have 20 billion people in this world by 2050. Like, where are we going to fit all these people? We're going to start taking over farmlands and natural habitats. So I think that there will be, because we have some agriculture in cities. Yeah, 20. That's what some predictions are saying. 20 billion. I mean, a lot less. Fewer predictions are more moderate than that. But like some people say that there's going to be a lot more people because every year we're getting more exponentially growing. Like if you look a few years ago, most things say that there's 11 billion, but that's from last year. 2 years ago, they only said that we would have 8 billion in 2050. You see how much this number is changing because how fast we're growing as a population, how further we're going through the demographic transition model. But some countries aren't even going to go to stage 4. They'll just stop in stage 3. They're perfectly content there. We can have a growing population. We can have a great world. But we already have some urban agriculture. And what that means is like small rooftop gardens where you can grow your fruits and veggies in New York City. What that also means is you have like a balcony with your other crops. You can't really have animals in cities, so it's mainly seed crops and root crops like veggies and fruits and stuff and nuts. But we're already starting to have some of that. But I personally think that we might start to see more of that in more cities and have designated areas that we can just have agriculture in cities because you have to have a program. You have to have something to feed the people. And if you've talked about Esther Boseroff and Thomas Malthus thinks that the human population grows on an exponential scale, but that Agriculture only grows linearly. What we need to do to combat that as a civilization, the next agricultural revolution will be when we can make food grow, agriculture grow on an exponential scale, just like human population. Esther Boserup said we'd have innovation just like the Industrial Revolution to help feed the growing population. And that's what our next agricultural revolution will be. So, getting back around to the actual question, yes, I think that there will be a next agricultural revolution. And that's a great question. Because if you're coming to the stream, you want to learn more. You want to see what you can write about and what you can actually learn from the course. Getting a 5 on the AP exam is the end goal. But while you're doing that, you also want to actually be learning something that you can take with you into life or into your future endeavors. So back to the global system of agriculture. So these large-scale commercial agricultural operations, they're taking over now. They're the ones with the big farms with hundreds of workers spread out across the country. And so complex commodity chains look production and consumption. What that means is I'm growing some oranges in Florida, but those oranges are going to go on a ship from Miami, and they're going to go all the way over to, let's say, the port of Lisbon, Portugal. And then from Lisbon, they're going to go on a train to Paris, France. That's the commodity chain. The production in Florida is going to go to Miami, to go to Lisbon, to go to Paris, to get the oranges to Paris. And so we have long distance travel routes, just like we got from the Industrial Revolution. We got those railroads, and now we're building on those more ideas to make ways of transportation to not just transport people, but to transport our food. Commodity chain does really take into account globalization. That's really globalization is one of the biggest key vocabulary words in human geography. Okay, so technology has increased economies of scale in the agricultural sector and the carrying capacity of the land. That's a lot of vocabulary words in that sentence that you're going to learn in your next 2 units, the last 2 units of the course. But basically, what I'm trying to say is that technology is what causes us to be a growing population. Technology is what causes us to be able to keep up and make more food for more people. And the carrying capacity of the land, we're trying to increase how many people we can fit into the small space. We need to make sure that we have space for all these people that are going to come into our world in the next few years. And some countries have become highly dependent on one or more export commodities. Yes, countries are dependent on each other. If you think about it, oil is one of the biggest resources that we use in America, but we don't have a ton of it. We get a lot of it from the Middle East. America is very dependent on the Middle East for oil. That means that we need that to function the same way our country does. We need to be able to get this oil from the Middle East. And Japan is one of the biggest examples of a dependent country. You know how they're so far ahead in technology from us. They're supposedly 10 years ahead of us in every piece of technology. They have a ton of corporations there, like Samsung's in South Korea, but it has big offices in Japan, and they have a lot of innovation there, and their culture is based on building on what's already come and making new things. So it's a tiny island, so they don't have a ton of natural resources. Really, a lot of what they have in Japan is just volcanoes, mountains, and some natural resources like water and fish. They don't have oil, coal, natural gas reserves. They have to rely on other countries for those things. Japan is one of the most dependent countries in the world. And Marcus in the chat says, not to get too political, but does this mean that globalism will defeat nationalism? Yes, because you saw how the USSR formed in the 1900s because they were trying to get more land, because they wanted the natural resources in the area. And what happened is that they engulfed all the space. So I think that nationalism, personally, will be able to make countries be like, oh, I can get my own natural resources, we can innovate. But at some point, they're going to plateau. They're not going to be able to be self-sufficient. They need to rely on other countries. So that's why organizations like UN, NATO, EU, the OPEC, they're all here to make sure that countries can rely on each other even when we're going to war, and make sure that we still get the resources that we need to function in society. That's a great question. Okay. And here is some countries' biggest exports. So we can look at when I was talking about dependency on other countries, we can look at the United States. Our biggest export is capital goods. But how do we make capital goods? So one of the things here is, I don't think that it's written there, but plastic things. You know how we make plastics? We make it from oil. So we're dependent on these countries like, okay, you know what? It's geography. Can anybody tell me the name of this country that my pointer is on right here that we get crude oil from? Can anybody tell me what that country is in the chat? Yes, Hugh, it's Libya. So we can get oil from Libya to make these plastics that we can turn into things like a case for your phone or your earbuds or anything like that. So we also, and look at Japan over here, their biggest export is motor vehicles. That's something that takes a long time to make. Like, I don't know if you've ever seen like snapshots of factories where they make cars, but that requires a lot of moving parts. And that means that they need to get all of the materials to make the cars from other places. Like, they need the metals, like uranium, gold, and all of these other metals that we can get from these metal-rich countries in Africa and in the Caucasus region over here to make sure that we can get what we need to make the products that we use today. This map isn't something that you need to know everything from. It's just interesting to look at, like, what do we get from where? Like, you can see, like, China, the US, Japan. Like, you can look at some of the more industrialized countries and see, oh, their exports are more manufacturing based. But then you can look at some of the other less developed countries, like you can see Afghanistan. What's their biggest export? Opium. And then you can go over and look at, oh, you can't read that, I'm sorry. But you can go look at Morocco. Their biggest export is clothing. While they're a little bit industrialized, they have some workers, and it's not just a, mineral or extracting resources economy. They're actually making some things versus some of these other countries in Africa where they just get oil from, where big companies from the more industrialized countries can come in and get these resources. So, I mean, it's just kind of something interesting to look at. It's never something that you'll have to memorize. You'll never have to know that copper is the biggest export from Chile and Peru. Like, you will never need to know that for the AP exam. It's just something interesting to look at, like, and even just the colors, like, where do I see big groups of colors? Like, from the key at the bottom. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to move on. And if you go on the app.fiveable.me page for this stream, I have links to all of the resources that I use in this presentation, like the slides and the vocab sheet that I put at the bottom. You can get all of those on the website, the link that you've registered for the stream, if you go to the Fiveable website and look at these after the stream. Look at them to study for your test or your AP exam. All of the streams should have their slides at least out there, so you can always look at something that you're not familiar with to review. All right, so now, since this is the last stream for the unit, it's not a giant group of topics. I want to look at a practice FRQ for the unit. Is that okay with y'all? Okay, so Jacob says, I think I might fail the AP exam, not gonna lie, and Marcus agrees, I think. But if you just take this time to study and look like over a few streams in the next month, you're going to, Marcus was saying that's a good idea that we're doing the FRQ. I hear what you're saying. Sorry, you will not fail. If you look at a prep book, if you are able to watch more of these streams, it will immensely help you prepare for the AP exam, especially looking at any old released FRQs like I'm about to do with you. This can really help prepare you for the AP exam. All right, so this map shows areas of shifting cultivation, a form of subsistence agriculture. So you can see that there's nothing in the US, there's nothing in Western Europe of subsistence. You mainly see it in Latin America, South America, some of Africa, and also some Southeast Asia over here. We don't really see it in Australia, China, Western Europe, the US, the countries that you think of as powerful more in the world. Okay, so what we can do right now, we have two options. Either we can go through, and I'm going to put a little poll down here on the bottom of the video if you can see that, but I'll put a poll here. We can do option 1, which will be to invite you guys on screen, what I can do, and you guys can try to discuss, like, say, how you would answer each part of the FRQ. That's option 1, or you can just put it in the comments if you want to answer it. But then option 2 is we can look at one of the sample responses and go through it and grade it together, because one of the biggest problems with human geography, it's sometimes one of the first AP classes that people take. Most people don't understand the writing. So I'm putting a poll right here in the poll section, so you guys can go vote on what option you want to do. 1 is you can answer it, like we can all work together to answer the questions, or you can come on screen and answer them. And then option 2 is to grade one of the sample FRQs. Okay, so there are 30 people registered, so I'll give you guys 1 or 2 more minutes, but it looks like we have a pretty clear winner right now, and I think I know the reason for that. Okay. So if you go onto the stream page on Fiveable, if you guys can access that. Actually, you know what? Okay, so the 3 of you that want to do option 1, I'm going to appeal to everybody here. Okay, so I'm going to go into what the FRQ says. This is just the map. You don't really need it for the FRQ. It's just a good, look at this. Okay, so these are all the parts of the FRQ and how many points they're worth. Okay, so since there were, I think, 3 of you that voted for talking on screen here or putting it in the comments, you can put in the chat which section you want to do, and then after we do this, we can grade one of the sample FRQs. So if anybody puts in the comments that they want to do one part of this. And shifting cultivation, if you don't know what it is, it's a type of subsistence agriculture. If nobody wants to do any parts, then we can just grade an FRQ. Look at one of the sample responses. All right, okay, so it doesn't seem like anybody wants to do it, so maybe we can come back to this. But if you go to the Fiveable page for the stream, you can go, I'm putting the link in the chat over here. You can click on that. And if you scroll down to the bottom of the page, you'll see a resources section, and it'll say, do not open FRQ scoring guide. Great name, I know. Do not open. We love that. Okay. So I'm going to share my screen with you. You're going to have to give me 1 second. Takes a second to load, I'm sorry. Here we go. Okay, so here's the practice FRQ that I showed you. So if you guys want to scroll down with me to, let's go to page 4. Go to page 4 of the PDF. If you want to let me know in the chat when you get there, that'll be great. Give you guys 1 or 2 more seconds to pull this up. Okay, so if you can't pull up the document for some reason, you can see it on my screen. So the first question for the FRQ was define shifting cultivation, and it's a type of subsistence agriculture. So I'll read you what the rubric says. It says you can write any of the following: food grown for the farmer or farmer's family or kin. You could also say food grown for local consumption for villages and community market. Or you could say food not grown for commercial purposes. So it's just asking you to define subsistence agriculture. So this person said subsistence agriculture is a method in which the products and food produced are consumed by the farmers and their families, feeding themselves. And so do you guys think that one got the point? That part was worth 1 point. All right, let's see. Yes, I think that definition got the point too. And the AP readers would like to agree with you. That did earn full credit in Part A. So now, let's move on to Part B. The prompt for Part B, I'll scroll down a little bit on here, but it says, describe the practice of shifting cultivation. Now, I hope that you went over this in your classes, but shifting cultivation has 3 main steps. Okay, so the student said shifting cultivation is the process of using one area of land as farmland and moving on to another area of land to farm once the first is no longer as beneficial to the farmers. As farmers move from one area of land to another, they usually disperse, clear the old farmland in some way, and come back later once the land has recovered. Slash and burn agriculture is one example of shifting cultivation. As a certain area of land is used and then burned, farmers will move on to more areas. So I'm going to read you what the rubric said was acceptable for this response now. So it was saying, describe the practice of shifting cultivation. At first, it looks like he did good. So the rubric says he needs to talk about clearing, some kind of slash and burn, swidden, agriculture, anything like that. He mentioned slash and burn agriculture to clear the land. The next step of it is farming, using the land until it's no longer fertile. Boom, he did that. And then moving, shifting, part of shifting cultivation. He said to move on to another land when it's done. So I think that this person got the 1 point that was allowed for Part B. Don't you guys? Yeah? Okay. I think I agree, and the AP readers seem to agree too. I've seen the comments you guys are talking about, like the verb describe in the comments. So really for writing, when your teachers tell you something used to be 3 sentences, I didn't even count how many sentences this is, but you need to have enough to fully explain to the AP reader, like, what the question is asking. Don't just write 1 sentence, but as long as you can understand that you're fully describing it and read it like you're someone who's never taken AP Human Geography before and get it, that is usually enough to earn the point. As long as you actually have a sentence describing or going into more detail about what the prompt is saying besides just straight up answering it, there's usually no way that you don't get the point. So describe as 3 sentences is a good, 3 to 5 sentences is a good number, but I don't always love to put how many number of sentences something has to be because it really restricts how much you can write or, what you can and can't do. So now that they've gotten the point for Part A and B, they have 2 of 2 points so far. So let's move on to Part C. I think I'm going to have to scroll on this one. So the prompt for Part C was explain 1 reason why shifting cultivation was sustainable in the past. So it's talking about how was shifting cultivation sustainable in the past. So in the past, shifting cultivation was sustainable because there was a larger amount of farmland available. This is worth 1 point, by the way. Farmers could farm in these vast amounts of land without thinking of possible consequences. There was also a fewer amount of people to feed in general, so this type of farming was appropriate. The once clear farmland is now inhabited, and it is harder to feed a larger amount of people with a limited amount of farmland. So that's their response for Part C. And the question was asking, why was it viable in the past? So now I'm going to tell you what the rubric says for this prompt. It seems like they did a pretty good job of explaining. Okay, they must have. There was a lower population and more available land. They must link that. Or they must have lower population density. So, we're tying things in from other units. It's not, these FRQs are not just asking about 1 unit. we're tying things in from Unit 2 here. There was less population density. That's the easiest way to get the point on this one. You really have to make sure you're thinking about what you're talking about. Try to connect things across units. That's one of the biggest ways to get the bonus points on these FRQs for human geography. And do you guys think that this one got the point? So it looks like most of you are saying that they get the point. So I agree with you guys. He linked the lower population to larger amounts of land, and the AP readers agree. He got the point. And now let's move on to part D. This one was the largest part of the FRQ, and it was worth 4, count them, 1, 2, 3, 4 points. Explain 2 reasons why shifting cultivation is expected to diminish during the 21st century. All right, so we'll scroll down to part D for you guys to read with me. So the person, I guess they've been calling it he, but the person, I don't know if it's he or she, wrote, currently, shifting cultivation is expected to diminish because it is simply no longer sustainable or appropriate. For one, I would maybe find a better transition word than that, but he's done pretty good so far, so let's see. For one, population in areas that practice shifting cultivation has increased dramatically to the point where the food harvested from shifting cultivation is no longer enough to feed the population. A second reason for the predicted decline in shifting cultivation is the overall less unoccupied farmable land. Once uninhabited land is now inhabited. Therefore, shifting cultivation cannot be carried out in these areas. And shifting cultivation is heavily dependent on the large amounts of land. So, personally, I think that he did a pretty good job. He discussed 2 reasons, but what really matters are those 2 reasons on the rubric. So I'm going to pull out the rubric here since for this question it's a little bit longer. But for part D, they have to explain 2 reasons. So they get 1 point for each reason, and then they get 1 point for each explanation. So let's see. The person talked about less land available, and needing lots of land for shifting cultivation. And also, he talked about, let me double check this, that population has increased dramatically and there's less unoccupied land. So, without looking at the rubric, those 2 reasons are kind of similar, and I automatically see expanding growing population on the rubric right here. Perfect. But the thing is, they can't just say world population. They have to mention something of this explanation right here to get the 2 points for each section. Now, go back and see. Did they actually clearly say that there was an expanding population with more population density in the 21st century? Look really quickly and tell me in the comments what you think. Okay, so population is increasing dramatically. That means population is expanding. So yes, I would give them the point. But on the rubric, they're not getting the point for explaining it there because they just said that there needs to be more food to feed more people. They don't link anything from there. There's not, the only explanation that they mentioned was that there would be not enough food to feed all the people. That's not something that's on the rubric for the explanation for this. So that means that so far we can only give them 1 point for their FRQ so far, but we're only halfway through, so maybe they can get the 3 points in total now that they can get, but so far they only have 1. Okay, so let's go back and see. So they also mentioned that there was less unoccupied farmable land because the land was once uninhabited, but now shifting cultivation can't be carried out in those areas because there's not enough land. So on the rubric, if I could ever scroll to it, it does say that there is competing land use activities, which means that they're using the land for other things, right? But they don't explain that they occur at the expense of shifting cultivation. They don't say that. They don't say anything about environmental degradation. They didn't actually explain it. They said what's on the rubric, but you guys have to understand the rubric is for teachers and AP readers to grade. You need to make sure you're actually thoroughly explaining. That's why teachers will tell you 3 to 5 sentences, because you need to make sure that you're writing a lot to explain everything that you need to explain to get the points in the FRQ. You have to tell them that you know what you're talking about. And so in total, that got 1 point for part A, 1 point for part B, 1 point for part C, and then of the giant 4-part D, they got 2 points in total. So they got 5 out of the available 7 points. That's not bad. If you can score a 5 out of 7 on all of your FRQs on the exam, you're on a good track to make a 5. If you can do just as well on your multiple choice, you can make a 5. Some people think that making a 5 can only happen if you make like 100 or a 90 on the test. But if you can just make like an 80, like you're a 70, high 70, low 80, you're in pretty good shape. And you will definitely, like on a 3 for human geography, I think you'll have to get 55% of the exam correct. You only have to know half of what's on the exam to make a 3 and pass the exam. That's how low the curves are, because some people really come into this exam as their first AP exam as freshmen unprepared. So if you do the studying, you won't fail. If you try and not just rely on what you learn in class, or I think I read this in the textbook once, actually study a little bit before the exam, you will be in such great shape and you will not fail. So your exam has 50-50 multiple choice FRQ. So those of you who aren't that good at multiple choice, those of you who aren't as good as writing, but you're pretty good at the multiple choice, and you can get like 80% of the multiple choice correct, and you can get like 2 or 3 points on every FRQ, you can make a 3 with that. You might even be able to make a 4 with that. Like, it's not, you need to try to improve your skills for your future AP courses, definitely. But if you can do it, you should definitely try to improve. And what you can do is, I found this FRQ by just Googling AP Human Geography Practice Agriculture FRQ. College Board publishes all their old FRQs. So if you're not good at FRQs, try. Do the writing. Time yourself even if you get closer to the exam. But make sure that you're practicing. That's how you get better at things. Like, people say, oh, if I just read this prep book for the SAT, I'll know all the material, I'll be perfect. No. What you need to do is you need to practice. You need to expose yourself to the type of questions that will be on the exam, so you want to be prepared. And I know that, I didn't focus on the topic of the stream the whole time, and I'm sorry for those of you who really wanted to learn about agricultural history, but this is the last Unit 5 stream, and prepping for your Unit 5 test or for the exam is really important. And that's the end goal of watching all these streams, right? You want to make sure that you know what you need to know for the AP exam and get a 5 and make those AP exams Fiveable. And I would encourage you guys to watch the other streams for AP Human Geography. And I also want you guys to make sure that you are studying. Make sure you're preparing for your AP exams. I think that's all I have for you today. If you have any questions, I'll answer them now. I have other resources under that link that I posted in the chat a while ago if you want to look at them for the stream or for Unit 5 in general. But I have time right now. I can take your questions. I will help you make sure that you know everything you need to know for Unit 5 or even just the rest of AP Human Geography. Please put any questions that you need to in the chat. So what units are connected to this stream? So this stream, I was talking about Unit 5, which is the agriculture unit. And more specifically, I don't know if I have any teachers on here, but hey, I hope I didn't do too bad. You can see that I talked about the specific, I put the numbers. If your teachers have the little poster in their room with the colorful units, and it says Unit 5 and it says 5.1, Introduction to Agriculture, 5.2, the way that agriculture came to be. If your teachers have that AP course and exam description poster, that's where I got these numbers from. I structured the presentation to make sure that I covered the topics that you need to know for the AP exam. So if you ever need to look something up, you can just Google Agriculture Origins and Diffusion 5.3, and you can get more information on it. Oh, so somebody asked what's the Fertile Crescent. So actually, I'll go to this map this time. I know that it's not the agriculture history map, but the Fertile Crescent is where the Middle East is. It's this little, I'm going to try to draw a crescent on here, this little moon shape right here that I keep scrolling over with my mouse. I really hope that you can see this red pointer. I'm so sorry I can't change the color. But this little, semicircle, they call it a crescent over here. That's where agriculture started. You can also think of Mesopotamia, if you know what that is, one of the first civilizations that came in the Fertile Crescent. Because people were able to settle in that city and make, agriculture. And Marcus asks, how the heck does it start in a desert area? Well, I don't know if you were on earlier, but the Middle East over here, it's not always desert. What happened to it is desertification. That's one of the vocab words in AP Human Geography. So what they did is they overused the soil, and they didn't change their crops because they didn't know all the science behind agriculture with the soil, but they degraded the land, and they made the soil infertile. They took all of the nutrients from the soil. Like the crops were overusing the soil too much, and they couldn't grow anything in the soil anymore. So they tried to plant things and they died. They just didn't use that soil anymore. And what happened is wind and water picked up the soil and it just floated away, it eroded away. And all you were left with was a sandy desert that you have today in the Middle East. But one way that you can still prove that it's the Fertile Crescent is you can see some really actually beautiful plant life and different things you don't see in other deserts across the world, especially in places that we don't want to go, like Iraq and Iran all the time. Like they actually have some pretty beautiful plant life, flora and fauna that were there since Mesopotamia, but still have adapted to the new climate, like plants that you don't expect to see in the desert. Like they have a form of bluebonnets growing in the desert. I don't know if you know what bluebonnets are, but they're the Texas state flower. I guess I didn't do introductions today. And I guess it's a little too late. What is an intertillage? That's a good question. That's, did you get that one from the vocab sheet? Yeah. So basically, what's the easiest way to explain this? Till agriculture, T-I-L-L, is when you take the nutrients from the top of the soil and all the dead stuff from when you're done harvesting and you put it to the bottom of the soil. So most people don't like that as an agricultural practice because then it can lead to soil erosion and desertification like that is talked about in the Middle East. And so intertillage is a combination between till and no-till agriculture. And so what it means is you're planting crops alternating, intercropping, like I said, where you put corn here, then potatoes next, then corn, then potatoes, to make sure that you're growing things at different times of the year, and where you can make sure that you're not going to have soil erosion so you can keep farming on that land and keep it sustainable. I hope that I answered your question, and if I didn't, Google and your teachers are a lovely resource. Well, Marcus says, so using a Minecraft hoe? Kind of. I mean, you're trying to shovel the soil from the top to the bottom. What's a suitcase farm? Actually, that's a really good question. I don't know. I'm going to look at my study guides that I have right here. But suitcase farmer. I would ask your teacher. I'll Google it real quick and tell you what that says, but I would definitely ask your teacher or consult a prep book. But Google says a grower of crops, mainly wheat, who lives outside the community except during the harvesting and crop growing seasons, and often farms without buildings or infrastructure. They do much of their farming by hired custom operators. So I'm sorry to say that I don't know what a suitcase farmer is, but I can tell you that I was not tested on what a suitcase farmer was on the AP exam. So just for reference. What about transhumanids? Okay, so transhumanids is kind of like being a nomadic farmer, but you're moving with your cattle and your livestock. So it's actually common in the areas around Ukraine and the Aral Mountains. I'm sorry, the Aral Sea. Oh my gosh, I just started making stuff up here. It's common around this area in the world, Eastern Europe, Western Asia, where some nomadic farmers will go around with their livestock and they'll stay in one area for a few days, but then they'll move on so their animals can keep grazing on things like grass and plants that are there, but that they don't strip the soil of all the plants that are there. So we don't have soil erosion and desertification because the farmers know what's what, and they know that if they stay in one place too long, their animals won't have anything more to eat. So they move with their animals and they make sure that they have places to eat. It's kind of like being a nomadic cattle farmer. Great question. Is the AP exam sectioned by unit? Sadly, the answer to that question is no. I would love it if the AP exam were sectioned by unit. I would know exactly what I was doing. You know, what the heck is this vocab word that I don't know? Oh, it's in population? Okay, so it has something to do with that. Yeah, no, I'm sorry. It's not sectioned by unit. Most teachers, for your test, they'll throw in a few questions from older units, which is a good strategy to help make you think not just about that unit, but about all of them. So, yeah, it's not sectioned by unit. I'm sorry. I wish I could tell you that it was, but I can tell you how the AP exam is sectioned. So you have your first hour and a half is multiple choice. Your second hour and a half, or maybe hour and 15, is your free response time. You'll get a small break in between, bathroom break, water, you know, the usual. But they're both worth 50% of your exam score, and you'll get 3 FRQs to write. And I think you have 60 multiple choice questions, and some of them will be stimulus-based questions. And what that means is you'll get a map like this, and you'll have to answer a few questions using the map and your knowledge from the course. Yes, you do get 3 FRQs. I know that might be a shock, but if you practice, it will become manageable. I promise you. The time it took us to grade that FRQ, we took about 15, maybe 20 minutes. If you could just write that in double the time, like, you'll be good. If you spend 30 minutes on each, no, you can only spend 25 minutes on each FRQ. 5 minutes thinking and planning, and then 20 minutes actually writing. So honestly, my advice is, if you don't know what you're talking about, this is like, please don't tell your teachers I said this. If you don't know what you're talking about, just throw in some vocab words that you think fit in with that unit, and then, like, you know, try to explain something that you understand and hope that you get points. Like, that's some of the best advice that I can give you about writing FRQs when you don't know what you're doing. Use some vocab words that you remember from the unit. Try to link it to the prompt. Hope that you get the points. But that's only when you have no clue what the prompt is asking. Always try, always use your knowledge that you learned from class. But yes. I'm sorry, I completely missed a question in the chat here. What about specialization? Basically, you specialize in growing one crop. I mean, that's not really a big vocab word that you'll need to know. The big vocab words you'll need to know are, like, that I've talked about so far, are fertile crescent, desertification, intercropping, and transhumanids, like that I've talked about in these past 5 minutes. Those are the main ones you'll actually need to know for the exam. Specialization is just you become specialized in growing or raising one type of agriculture. Nothing too hard, just special one thing. All right, so If I don't see any more questions, then I think I'm just going to close out. I will again leave you with the Fiveable social media platforms. And if you liked my stream, I'm sorry, can you remind us what desertification is? Yes, I can definitely do that before I leave. Desertification is when you plant the same kind of crop, or you let the soil, it's anything that causes the soil, your topsoil for your agriculture, to blow away, erode away. It's what causes your topsoil to go away, and then you can't use that soil for farming anymore. You don't use it, it ends up turning to desert sand. One of the biggest causes of soil erosion by wind is you plant the same crop in one area for too long, and then you can't grow anything in that area because that one crop has taken all the nutrients from the soil. You can't plant anything there. You don't do anything with the soil. It erodes away. You have no cover. So yeah, that's desertification. But if you liked my stream tonight and you're in AP Environmental Science, you can watch my stream tomorrow night for that. But I think that I'm streaming for Human Geography again. And let me just double check when I stream so I can tell you if you like my stream. But please watch all the other streams. We have one every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, which would be 4 p.m. Pacific. I think I'm not the best at math. 4 p.m. Pacific. For every week up until the exam. I'm doing a few more streams later in March for Human Geography, but remember to keep preparing for the AP exam and always think Fiveable. If you have any questions, there are discussion boards on Fiveable where you can always ask, and have a great night. Oh, by the way, if you guys haven't left yet, this was my first Human Geography stream ever, so if you want to tell me how I did, leave me any notes in the comments. That'd be great. All right. Have a great night.